When Victor Wembanyama first declared for the NBA draft, expectations were through the roof. He was widely considered the best prospect since LeBron James, some going as far as calling him the best prospect since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, or maybe even the best ever. Labeling a 19-year-old in that way puts a ton of pressure on him to deliver, and not only has he done that, it feels like every single night he's doing something we've never seen before. It's gotten to a point where Twitter accounts are now tracking Wembanyama or stat lines he puts up that nobody else in NBA history has done. And through 70 games, he's already done it 8 times. The primary factor behind these unreachable box scores has been his obscene shot blocking. On the season, he's averaging just under 4.5 blocks every 75 possessions. Just for some perspective, that's the most in a season since Hassan Whiteside back in 2016, and right around where guys like David Robinson, Hakeem Olajuwon, or Alonzo Mourning landed at their absolute peaks. Of course, it's his size that enables him to get a hand on so many shots, and I think it's hard to put into words just how much bigger he is than your typical rim protector. Here, he doesn't even have to leave the floor to reject a reverse layup, and you'll have a lot of plays where it almost feels like he's baiting offensive players into getting blocked. On this one, he first plays a drive, leaving Allen with some room to catch and finish. The ball is completely out of his hands while Wemby still has both feet on the ground, and it nearly gets sent to half court. Here's another example. Again, he has to help on a drive, which leaves his man with an opportunity to score down low, and that layup gets wiped off the glass. His freakish physical profile allows him to get a hand on the ball even when he's out of position. He's a touch late sliding down to a drive, but from behind is able to track the ball and take it right out of Fultz's hands. That has more to do with his length than his actual size. An 8-foot wingspan doesn't even sound real, and the plays he's able to make at the rim as a result are nothing short of stupid. In other words, it doesn't matter where he is on the court. Offensive players have to constantly be tracking him at all times. He's on the weak side elbow, so when Sexton beats his man off the dribble, he thinks he has an angle. Not quite. A whopping 1 minute later, something similar happened again. Utah clears the lane for Markkanen to post up a mismatch, and as soon as he thinks he has an opportunity, here comes Wembanyama. He makes it look effortless, but I'd say a large percentage of his blocks come against shots that nobody else in the league could get to. 10 times out of 10, this is a layup for Moses Moody. Victor just happens to break the rules. And that's because, in addition to the size and length, he's incredibly fluid as an athlete. Against pick and roll, he first plays the ball before spinning back to his man, and at this frame right here, it looks like you could add 2 points to the Wizards' total. I don't think I need to explain how ridiculous this is. With that said, like most young rim protectors, I do think he can get a bit too hungry for blocks at times. Here's one where Kyle Anderson doesn't have any sort of advantage with his man staying in front, and Wemby completely sells out, leaving Gobert with an open dunk on the follow. You'll often see him bite on simple fakes or hesitations, which leave him out of position and result in easy baskets. And this is only natural from someone so young. With time, he'll learn when or when not to stay on his feet or go vertical, whether that's to more effectively protect the basket or avoid picking up fouls. But it's also worth noting that due to those tools, he can get away with some errors, like on this one where Scoot hesitates to get Wemby up in the air, only for him to turn and still erase a layup. For these reasons though, I actually think that at Victor's absolute defensive peak, there's a pretty good chance he'll be blocking fewer shots than he is now, and that's not uncommon with great rim protectors. When Joel Embiid entered the league, he was very block hungry. Actually, here's a look at his shot blocking numbers each season since entering the league. That rookie year is a complete outlier, and I'd argue he's a significantly more disciplined and impactful defensive player today. What about Giannis? His best shot blocking season came in 2017 on a Bucks team that ranked as the number 20 defense. Just 3 years later, he was blocking noticeably less shots and snagged Defensive Player of the Year on one of the best team defenses we've ever seen. I'm not saying Wemby will follow the exact same trend, just that a huge part of defending the paint is how you're able to alter shots without getting a hand on them, or even more importantly, deter players from attempting them altogether. This season, he's holding his opponents to more than 11% worse than their expected average within 6 feet of the basket, and he's doing so on a team that asks him to protect the rim seemingly by himself. As a result, most guys don't even try to test him. When Conley beats a closeout, he's got at least 10 feet of space to either drive or get to a floater, but the whole time he's thinking pass. You'll have these possessions where he takes away the paint from entire teams. Nembhard tries a drive and pulls up for a midi that he ends up bailing out of. Then off the catch, Nesmith's gonna try to attack the rim himself, only to find out the hard way. This effect is especially noticeable when the Spurs go to a zone. You can't get the ball to Fultz in the middle because he's there tagging. Then when they swing it around to instead hit Paolo in the middle, he steps up to smother a mid-range jumper. Outside of basketball, I'd say there are two major passions driving me forward in life. First is of course creating content for you guys, and second is putting in that work in the gym. A huge part of achieving the best results with my workouts is making sure I eat healthy, but with most of my time spent cranking out videos, I find it pretty difficult to cook for myself. That's why when I found out about Factor, my whole world changed. With Factor, in just a matter of 2 minutes, I can get a fully prepared meal on the table without worrying about preparation, cooking, or cleaning up. Just simply unbox, heat it up, and enjoy. Factor is incredibly flexible in that I can always adjust the size of my order, get them delivered whenever I want, with so many different options such as Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. These fresh, never frozen meals changed my life, and they can do the exact same for you. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code HoopVenue50 to get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next one. That's code HoopVenue at Factor75 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next box while your subscription is still active. Everything I've talked about up to this point, from the size and fluidity to the ability to deter shots, has already made Wembanyama one of the league's best drop bigs. His positioning is incredible. First sitting in front of the ball to take away a potential drive, then once the pass is made, recovering to get a hand on the floater. His size and mobility helps him be in two spots at the same time. There's nowhere for Kobe White to attack, then when Vooch gets the ball, there's also nowhere for him to attack. He tries a post move over the top, and I think we all know how that goes. Like I mentioned earlier, even when he does appear to get beat, like Şengün getting a step by his hip on the roll, that doesn't mean it's going to lead to points at the rim. And as a result, when needed, he can even bring this coverage closer to the level of the screen to not give up pull-up threes. Zion catches with downhill momentum and appears to get the step, yet it's another block. Ball handlers are forced to make impossible decisions when coming off of screens. Of course, Trey's looking for the lob, but with Wemby dropping back, there really isn't an angle. So he instead tries his hand at a floater, which also happens to be covered. I think the craziest part about these plays, though, is how much he alters the geometry of the court. The natural counter for most guys who go up against drop coverage is the pull-up jumper. Wemby, however, drops back and still blocks a three with one of those long arms. That length changes everything for the opposing offense. I described it as being in two spots at once, and that really stands out on plays like this where he slides down to tag someone down low, leaving the corner, yet he's still able to recover and block a three. Or how about this one? Jokic first thinks midi, and Wemby gets a hand up to make him think twice. Then when Joker comes off a screen, they switch, and Victor reaches for a steal not one, but 2 times to force a turnover. He'll routinely blow up plays with active hands like this, tipping passes, stripping ball handlers. He's averaging 3.5 deflections per 36 minutes, which is second among all bigs. And again, it's primarily his length that completely erases passing lanes. Here he's on the left elbow, so naturally a roller on the right wing should have no trouble getting the ball, right? Well, Steph Curry thought so too. Here's another example. When Nembhard drives from up top, watch as Wemby completely commits to the paint from the weak side corner. Now, the problem is that he's matched up with Miles Turner, a big who will punish guys who help off of him. The natural counter? Don't ever let that kick-out pass get near him. He's averaging 1.5 steals every 75 possessions, most of which come after those deflections. And when you pair that turnover generation with the shot blocking, it leads to an obscene defensive box score. Stocks, or steals plus blocks, aren't an official stat, but many look to them as an indicator for defensive playmaking. A guy like Shea has received all defensive buzz in large part thanks to his 3.1 stocks per 75. Anthony Davis has oftentimes been credited as the modern day standard for stocks due to his unique versatility. He's up at 3.6. Maybe it'll be easier to describe what I'm getting at on a graphic, because a lot of great defensive players fill the stat sheet like this. Incredible rim protectors like Gobert, Embiid, and Jaren are all at about 3. Turnover forcing machines like Caruso or Thibault are in that 3.5 to 4 range. And then there's Victor Wembanyama, landing just a touch under 6. Similar to the shot blocking though, I wonder if less steals can actually help Wemby's value. Specifically in the case of Anthony Davis, when they matched up, he got Victor a couple times by catching his hand in the cookie jar. For the most part though, his one-on-one defense in these marquee matchups has looked really good. Here's another one against AD where he's fluid enough to remain in front of the ball, absorbs a shoulder bump to the chest, and gets a hand up on the finish. Many people thought his lack of strength would really hurt him in these spots, but he's shown that length can make the difference. Giannis throws all of his momentum into Wemby's lower body to create separation, only to get denied. And it's the same exact thing against post-ups. Şengün has no trouble overpowering Victor and getting to the rim, but there just isn't an angle to finish. Obviously, he hasn't been perfect against stars, like Embiid dropped 70, Jokic has had his way, but those are two of the best scorers ever. As Wemby fills out his frame and gets more reps against these guys, that isolation defense will only improve. With that in mind, I don't think the answer is just to put on a bunch of weight and hope for the best, because you don't want to lose that fluidity. This really stands out whenever he has to defend in space. Chet tries to take him one-on-one and hits him with a couple moves before stepping back for a jumper, which of course gets rejected. But it isn't just perimeter-oriented bigs I'm referring to. This time it's a wing who tries to use his speed advantage on a drive, and Wemby not only moves his feet really well, he again absorbs contact and holds his ground to force a tough shot. Or how about a star like Paolo Banchero? He moves his feet to shut off a drive, decelerates and changes direction to go vertical, and makes it a really difficult finish. These incredible perimeter possessions aren't rare, although I still think he's a ways away from being a consistent switch big. At times, he's just awkward as a result of being the same height as Boban Marjanovic, and there's still his tendency to bite on fakes or hesitations, resulting in a decent amount of blow-bys. Still, the level of defense he's playing has been matched by very few, if any, rookies in NBA history. The way he shuts off the paint from entire teams, how he forces turnovers, his ability to match up with various different stars. I mean, there's a reason he's showing up on Defensive Player of the Year ballots. As a team, the Spurs are the 22nd best defense in the NBA, which sounds pretty underwhelming, but it's important to make the distinction between Victor and the rest of the squad. With him on the floor, they've had a defensive rating of 114, which would land him in the 67th percentile among all players. With him off the floor, that number is a measly 120, or basically performs like the worst defense in the league. You could even argue that a 6-point swing doesn't quite do his impact on the Spurs justice. Cleaning the glass is a site that filters for garbage time, and among all players who have recorded at least 1,000 minutes, his on-off swing is first by a wide margin at almost 10. Now, of course, this fails to account for who's on the floor with him, who's on for the opposing team, but it's one of those indicators that really makes you scratch your head and wonder if he's single-handedly keeping the squad from being the worst defense in the NBA in just 29 minutes a game. Whether or not he should win Defensive Player of the Year, I'll leave that for you in the comments to debate, but one thing's for sure. He's at worst a top 5 or so defender in the game and probably isn't even close to his defensive ceiling. as he becomes more disciplined, starts to play more minutes, and develops as an athlete, everything points to him one day becoming one of the best defensive players we've ever seen. The craziest part? I think you could make the argument that his offensive evolution might actually be more fascinating. Whereas most players have a defined role, Wemby sort of feels like he does a little bit of everything. What I mean by that is when you look around the league, guys like Luka or Trey are primary ball handlers who like to create in the pick and roll. Players like Kevin Huerter or Klay Thompson are off-ball shooters who primarily play on the fly or run around screens in set action. Bigs like Gobert or Capella are pretty exclusively used as rim runners, while more skilled passers like Sabonis or Jokic may initiate offense from up top. There are a plethora of roles, and like I said, with Victor, it's kind of up in the air. Is he a guard? Is he a wing? Is he a big? Well, it varies from possession to possession because he might be all three depending on the play. One thing that's really stood out to me is how good he is at running the floor. He's second among centers at 4 points a game in transition, and that comes from a combination of being light on his feet, teams having no answer for his length when operating with an open floor, and of course his finishing ability. I mean, seriously, it feels like his teammates can just toss the ball anywhere near the basket and he'll find a way to put it in. That isn't exclusive to fast breaks. On this one, he isn't even open in the traditional sense of the word, but points a finger to the sky knowing that if he gets a lob, there's no way Draymond can stop him from scoring. San Antonio's roster isn't exactly filled with the greatest passers, so a lot of times they'll either miss him or put him in a position where it feels like he doesn't have an angle. That's where the length comes in. As long as he's in the same area code as the rim, he's a threat to score. To set up these opportunities, he can operate like a traditional big, sealing off low post positions so that he can turn and finish with ease. Most of the time though, his movements are much more like that of a huge wing, using his agility to cut backdoor for a lob. He's already an elite off-ball mover. This time he's being defended by Kawhi, and what I want you to focus on is his arms. All of NBA history's sharpest movers will make contact and swing the arms to create space while cutting, and with his frame, that's a cheat code. Sometimes it'll even start with some set action. Here he starts in the corner and appears to be running off a pin down, only to reject it on a backdoor with nobody to protect the paint. Another way you'll see him catch the ball around the basket is through the pick and roll. Like I said, even without an advantage, all you have to do is throw it up and he'll find a way. Here's a great example of what I mean. When he hands it off to Vassell, Sabonis does a good job in drop coverage of not giving up an easy look, so Vassell just tosses it off glass knowing his big man will be there. As a roller, the defense cannot leave him with even an inch of room, because if he gets just 1 foot into the paint, the play is as good as done. And the defense better have a big low man. On this one, it's Wiggins who steps up to meet him early, but that's too big of a size advantage for Wemby to attack. Even if the defense is able to load up in a way that prevents Victor from getting to the rim, he has unlimited access to short mid-range shots over the top. Even more importantly though is his decision making in these spots. 2 go to Vassell on the ball, leaving Wemby with a 4-on-3 advantage, and he makes a quick no-look pass to the weak side corner, which results in a practice jumper. Remember, I earlier mentioned San Antonio's lack of playmakers, and that stands out most when Wemby's screening. He's shown that he can get above the rim, capitalize on advantages in the short roll, but sometimes they just simply miss him or can't get the ball there, which means this aspect of his game is far from being maximized. That's why a ton of fans have mentioned making a move for a guy like Trae Young, someone who can pressure the defense himself and levers that into opportunities for his big. Then selecting a coverage becomes a nightmare as Victor already has immense off-ball gravity himself. Even without being maximized, Wemby's attempting just under 7 shots at the rim every 75 possessions and making almost 71% of them. That production is essentially equivalent to Nikola Jokic. Great company if you ask me, and it suggests that next to an elite playmaker, he could one day become the league's best play finisher. Another way he's been utilized as a screener is of course with the pick and pop, as one of the big draws with him entering the league was his outside shooting. Now, this is something that really hasn't panned out in year number 1 quite like many thought it would. He's attempted 214 catch and shoot threes, so we're looking at a pretty decent sample, yet he's only hit a measly 27.6%, making him one of the least efficient in the entire NBA. I think it has to do with his height and how awkward that makes his mechanics when catching, setting his feet, and firing. Whatever the explanation, the catch and shoot game has not been good, which makes it really interesting when you instead look at off the dribble shooting, as he's hit about 38% of his 161 attempts. And to really highlight how absurd this is, here's a graph showing the total blocks and pull-up threes of every player in the league. What Wemby's doing is unprecedented. These aren't exactly easy looks. This one reminds me a bit of Kevin Durant, hanging the left-hand hesitation and using that space to rise right over the top of his defender. And that height makes him completely incontestable. Lively is right with him the whole way, but it doesn't make a difference. Such effective pull-up shooting has allowed him to run pick and roll as a ball handler. Again, it's the left-hand hezi, his defender goes under, and that's too much room. Some defenses will try a switch against the inverted pick and roll, and guards don't even have a chance at getting a hand up. Then as soon as he gets blitzed or trapped, the height gives him access to easy passing angles, leaving his team with an advantage to attack. The main reason he can initiate from the perimeter like this is how advanced his ball handling is at that size, which is likely the culprit for him often being referred to as an alien. When Kevin Durant burst onto the scene, the NBA had never seen a 7-footer move with such fluidity while handling the ball, and in many ways it feels like we're seeing the supersized version of that with Wemby, just in terms of how natural it looks. I mean, here's one where he hits Rudy Gobert with the world's longest sham god, which leaves him with some space to step into for a lengthy finish. Or how about this one? Sizing up Jared Allen with a couple dribbles before stepping back into a long-range jumper over his head. He's not afraid to get creative with it. This time it's a drive right, and he changes direction while gathering behind his back, then those lengthy strides take care of the rest. Handling the ball like this at his size is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, you have plays that make it look like he was carefully crafted in a lab to break basketball. But the unfortunate reality of being so tall is that it's virtually impossible to secure the ball like a smaller guard. When dealing with pressure, operating in traffic, or trying to break down his man with some more advanced moves, he can be very turnover prone. It's not like I don't expect him to get better, just that there is a ceiling that comes with being a jumbo-sized ball handler. So while I think he can operate like a guard at times, I still much prefer his game inside the arc. That could mean facing up for a standstill isolation where he has unlimited access to mid-range jumpers. And what really stands out to me in these spots is the speed of his decision making. Right off the catch, he jabs right into a drive left, and although it's defended well, that finishing is next level. Here's another one from the same game. He catches in the same spot, does the exact same move, only this time he's going up with a little more power. As for his back to the basket game, I think it's still pretty raw and probably where he'd benefit most from the addition of some strength, but he does have some good reps. That size and length is just a lot to deal with, so when he gets close to the basket, chances are he'll be able to turn his way into something of quality. As a result, on many possessions, the best option for opposing defenders is to simply send him to the line. From day one, he was an elite foul drawer, landing in the 93rd percentile at over 6 free throw attempts per 75, and even more importantly, hitting almost 80% of them, so he's making the defense pay. And while the scoring game is big, I'd say his most valuable attribute when posting up is his ability to find cutting teammates. They'll sometimes run quick action through him in the mid-post, such as a give and go, and he's comfortable hitting tight windows as a passer. I don't think anyone anticipated him being this advanced of a passer this early. Here's one that starts with one of those deep seals, and the defense collapses while he's catching the ball, so instead of coming down with it, he redirects it into the hands of Jeremy Sochan. This one's even more impressive. He appears to be pulling up for a mid-range jumper over Capella, and in midair finds an open Trey Jones for free points. One thing I always look for when assessing a passer is how many of their assists result in shots at the rim. That's the most efficient spot on the floor and where it takes much tighter windows to sneak the ball through. Guys like Trey, Luka, or Harden mastered these reads with the use of the lob, whereas a player like Jokic or LeBron is constantly finding cutters, whether that's out of the mid-post or in set action. This season, more than 55% of Wemby's assists have resulted in a shot at the rim. That's a huge signal and higher than all of the names I just mentioned, as well as other elite passers like Halliburton or CP3. Some of these even start with a live dribble. This time it's one of those high ball screens, and he uses his length to scoop the ball right into the hands of an open roller. Here it is again. You have the ball screen, he appears to be attacking, only to throw a no-look, live dribble bounce pass to Trey Jones for a tough finish. As a rookie, he's still in a trial and error phase of figuring out what works as a playmaker and what doesn't. I love that he's not afraid to take risks, but sometimes that results in him forcing opportunities that aren't quite there. And I do think part of the reason why so many of his assists end up in shots at the rim is because he isn't yet comfortable making the skip pass. He gets doubled in the post and has two options on the weak side, yet isn't able to get the ball there. When you pair these passing errors with the handling limitations I talked about, it's true that Victor turns the ball over a lot. At almost 4.5 turnovers per 75, he's averaging the second most in the NBA, and that's while only touching the ball 59 times a game. If we look at the relationship between touches and turnovers, you can see that taking care of the ball is probably his biggest weakness as an offensive player right now. It's important to separate the player from the situation though. I'm not sure what those numbers would look like in a better offensive environment, or like I said earlier, next to an elite playmaker. In addition to the turnover issues, he's also capped his efficiency as a scorer with his overutilization of the mid-range. On the season, he's taking 7 of these shots per 75, but only making 37% of them. And while some of that comes back to situation, you'll still see some plays where he lets the defense off the hook by settling for a long two. Still, because he's so effective at the rim and gets to the line at such a high rate, his efficiency has a really high floor. Even with the mid-range stuff and his lackluster catch-and-shoot numbers, he's only about 1% below the league's average in true shooting. He's got the volume to go along with it at almost 26 points per 75, so while the team doesn't really do him any favors, his scoring still looks to be very effective. I think it's difficult to evaluate his offense as it stands right now. On one hand, I see those limitations when it comes to shot selection and especially the turnovers, then wonder how that would look on a team that's actually trying to compete. On the other hand, I see the mega interior finishing, the pull-up shooting, the passing and fluidity, the overall versatility, and think that next to high-end talent, he'd be one of the easiest plug-and-play guys I've ever seen. The Spurs have the number 27 offense, and unlike on defense, there really isn't a signal that points to a big-time carry job, rather a slight boost to a team that struggles to score. And I think that's fair. The flashes are there, but the consistent product feels like a slight to strong positive at the time, as opposed to an all-star level offensive player. However, when you add in the defense, that still leads to an incredible overall impact. I'd say right now you could make the argument that he's a top 17 to 20 player in the league, and it's possible that on a better team we'd even see some top 15 talks. With all of that said though, he's barely even scratched the surface of what he can be. He's competing for Defensive Player of the Year with a ton of room to improve. He's scoring and passing like a star with so many different traits to work on. And at just 20 years old, he looks to be every bit of the generational prospect he was hyped up as. maybe even a little more. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Wemby. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.